I'm 78 years old. I need to say this plainly. I waited too long to become a person in my own life. I didn't understand my purpose until I was 61.
And it didn't arrive as a clean realization. It came because something
Finally broke in a way I couldn't fix with responsibility, busyness, or pretending everything was fine.
I'm saying this now because I'm closer to the end than the beginning.
And I don't have the energy to soften it anymore. I want to tell the truth, the way I wish someone had told it to me earlier. These days, I sit at the kitchen table in the morning and listen to how quiet the house is. Quiet isn't always peace. Sometimes it's absence. No footsteps in the hallway. No one clearing their throat in the next room. No second cup to rinse. Just the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, and me catching myself waiting for a sound that isn't coming. For most of my life, I thought I was built on responsibility. And I was proud of that. I remembered birthdays, kept the pantry full, paid the bills on time, held everything together so well that no one ever thought to ask if I was being held too. When I was young, I thought that was what love looked like. I grew up in a home where women didn't talk about what they wanted. My mother worked from the moment she opened her eyes to the moment she closed them. Cooking, washing, folding, worrying. Her hands were always moving, like stillness was dangerous. My father believed in providing and not much else. He wasn't cruel, he just didn't have the language for tenderness. He came home tired, ate quietly, and sat in silence, like the day had taken everything out of him. I learned early that being good meant being easy. So when I left home in my early 20s,
I didn't leave with dreams. I left with rules. Be useful. Don't need too much. Don't cause trouble. Be grateful. I got a job as a secretary in an office with buzzing fluorescent lights and tired carpet. Burnt coffee every morning. Men in ties who called me on like it was my name. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And back then, steady mattered more than happiness. I married at 25. His name was Frank. Frank wasn't romantic. He didn't bring flowers or plan surprises, but he was dependable, and I mistook that for the whole story. When you're young, you don't always know the difference between safety and closeness. We started in a small apartment with thin walls and heat that clanked all winter. I made it nice anyway. I learned how to make ordinary things look chosen. We had 2 children by the time I was 30, a boy, then a girl. I remember their childhood in fragments. Sticky fingers, bath soap, lunch bags on the counter, socks that vanished. The way my son used to run into the house like he was being chased by joy. I was tired all the time, but I didn't call it tired. I called it life. Frank worked long hours, sometimes overtime, sometimes a second shift. He said, "It's for the family," and I believed him because I was saying the same thing to myself. When my youngest started school, I went back to work. We needed the money, but we also needed to feel like we were doing things right. I took a job in medical billing. Numbers, codes, irritated voices on the phone. The kind of work where you learn to smile with your voice, even when your stomach is tight. My days became a loop. Up early, breakfast, kids, laundry, work, pickups, homework, dinner, dishes, more laundry, collapse. I did that for years. And the strange part is, it didn't feel like I was choosing anything. It felt responsible. I didn't realize I was postponing my own life because delay looked like virtue. But there were moments when something almost broke through. Like my daughter's school play. She practiced lines all week, wore her costume around the house. I told her, "Of course I'll be there." Then the day came and someone at work called in sick. End of month claims were due. My supervisor said, "I really need you." And I said, "Yes." I arrived halfway through the play. I stood at the back of the auditorium trying to find her face under the lights. Afterward, she didn't cry. She just said, "It's okay, Mom," and turned away too quickly. That sentence stayed with me for years. Or my son with baseball. He asked me to come watch him practice. I said, "Maybe Saturday." Saturday came with groceries and bills and a house that never stayed clean. Next week became next month. One day he stopped asking. That's how it happens. Not with explosions. With small postponements that feel harmless. Frank and I didn't have a marriage that shattered. We had one that thinned. We spoke in logistics. We didn't ask how the other was doing. We were tired, and tired people don't always know how to reach. Sometimes I tried. I'd say, "Do you ever feel like," and stop when he sighed or looked at the clock. I swallowed the rest, because I was trained to be easy. By my 40s, I had headaches like pressure behind my eyes. The doctor said stress and told me to rest. I laughed in the car afterward because I didn't know what rest meant. By my 50s, the kids were grown and gone. People say that's when you get your life back. But nobody tells you that sometimes you don't know where you put it. The house got quieter. Instead of freedom, I felt exposed. Frank and I tried to reconnect. Dinner sometimes, a short trip to a lake. One morning I sat outside with coffee, watching the water, and felt late, like I'd arrived after my own life had already started packing up. Then Frank began forgetting things. At first it was almost funny. Then it wasn't. It was Alzheimer's. The diagnosis felt like paperwork, brochures, careful voices. We drove home in silence. That year, when I was 61, my purpose finally showed up. Not as an idea, as necessity. Frank began slipping away by inches. I became his memory, his calendar, his direction. I learned to answer the same question without letting my voice harden. I learned how to guide him without humiliating him. I learned how to grieve someone who was still sitting across from me. And something unexpected happened. For the first time in my life, I stopped living for approval. Caregiving doesn't come with praise. It comes with repetition, an exhaustion that settles in your bones, and clarity. I saw my old life clearly. I had given my best energy to people who barely knew me, and saved what was left for the ones I loved most because they felt safe. Love isn't just work and worry. Love is presence. And presence is what you trade away when you believe there will always be more time. One night, Frank woke up frightened. He thought he was late for work. He tried to leave the house. I stood in front of him and said, "You're safe. I'm here." He stared at me, then cried. Frank had never cried like that. I held him, and everything unnecessary fell away. This was real. This was what vows meant. Frank lived 4 more years. The last was the hardest. Then one morning, he didn't wake up. No goodbye. After the funeral, people said I was strong. Then they went back to their lives. Weeks later, I found myself holding 2 coffee mugs at the sink. That's when loneliness began, not just missing him, but missing being needed. I had spent my whole life being necessary. When that ended, I didn't know who I was. I cleaned things that weren't dirty, watched television too late, told myself I should be grateful. At night, I felt a heaviness without a name. One afternoon, I found an old photo of myself at 32, holding my daughter, stirring something on the stove. I felt tenderness for that woman. I wanted to tell her to stop rushing, because you don't receive presents as a reward later. You practice it while life is happening, or you miss it. After Frank died, I volunteered at a food pantry. Basement, folding tables, quiet people. I learned names, and I learned this. Most people don't want advice. They want to feel like they still belong. So I tried to offer presents. That became my purpose, not a title. Presents. At 61, I finally understood something. Purpose isn't something you achieve. Sometimes it's something you allow. I started writing memories down about my mother's hands, my children's voices, Frank clearing his throat before saying something tender, and I realized how many choices I made without noticing. What breaks your heart later isn't always failure. It's delay. You think there will be a better time. Then life moves on. I'm 78 now. I still regret things, but I'm grateful I stopped living like real life was always starting tomorrow. There's no triumphant ending, just morning light, a slower body, and a heart that finally understands. Love is mostly attention. I don't know how many years I have left, but I know I'm done waiting.